Welcome in, everyone. It might be a new semester, but we've still got college football to talk about. I'm Jay Smith. This is Bradley Kendall. We've got the Bear, Evan McDowell, in the back in the Bear Cave, and this is After Further Review, Tiger Vision's college football rundown show. Bradley, we got a lot to talk about, a lot to cover. Let's jump right into it. Go with this offseason After Further Review.
Well, we came, we saw, but we were not able to conquer big mighty Bama, unfortunately. The tide rolled on despite our, I think, across-the-board predictions for Clemson to win the national championship. None of that came true, unfortunately. But regardless, it was still a great season. We got a lot to be proud of our Tigers. We're not able to defend the national championship, but we got a lot to be proud of and a lot to talk about here.
Oh, yeah.
So, what was, I guess, looking back, I mean, we had, 12 wins this year? I think 10 wins against top 25 teams, which was by far the top in the country. What were some of the highlights you had from this season?
I really think, honestly, Clemson obviously had a 12-win season, which I want to say that's either the seventh or, and I don't know, Evan, you might be able to look this up quicker than we could, the seventh or eighth time in school history that's happened. Maybe. I think recently we've had a lot
of third or fourth time in the last couple of years.
Yeah. I mean, it's been consistent now, but I think the most impressive part of last season for Clemson was the fact that they were able to secure 4 road wins against top 25 teams. You had Louisville in week 3 on the road. They won that game 47-21. Then Virginia Tech a couple weeks later, they take care of them 31-17. You've got NC State later in the season, beat them in a close one 38-31, and then you finish out the regular season on the road, South Carolina, convincing win 34-10. So looking at Clemson's schedule as a whole, looking at their offense and their defense and how they performed as kind of a placeholder year, if you will, I think the biggest takeaway is the fact that for the first time in a long time, Clemson took care of business on the road, except for that Syracuse game. When it mattered and when the games were big, Clemson showed up.
Yeah, I mean, there were games throughout the year where you almost wish they were on the road because it just seems like our team was more focused and just ready to play when the game was in a hostile environment like a Louisville or like a Virginia Tech. And going back to the beginning of the season, I think that was the most impressive part of the season was how we were able to get things going early on. You had Auburn, Virginia Tech, and Louisville like back to back to back, and that could have been a make or break to your season right there. And getting those 3 wins, I think really was able to give the team confidence, and going forward, it played a big factor late in the year, especially that Auburn win, which looked a whole lot better as the weeks went on.
Yeah, I mean, like looking at the schedule, the Auburn game was the only game where Clemson scored less than 20 offensive points. Like you look at the rest of the schedule, like opening the season, Kent State 56 points, 47 on the road to Louisville, 34 against BC, 31 at Virginia Tech, 28 Wake Forest. Like they were just, the offense was cranking out and the defense was playing great. 3 points allowed to Kent State, 6 points allowed with Auburn, 7 with BC, 17 Virginia Tech, 14 with Wake. So they really, to open the season, Clemson was rolling.
I think we thought beginning of the year a lot of the pressure was going to be on the defense to kind of make up for the lack of the offense that was going to come into the season because it was more of a rebuilding. You had Kelly Bryant obviously trying to replace Deshaun Watson, but I think the offense did a great job of balancing the team out and not putting as much pressure on the defense. Towards the end of the season, we saw how it kind of came back to get him. We saw all the, the question marks behind the offense kind of come back to get him towards the end of the year. The deep ball threat, Kelly wasn't able to get the ball down the field. The defense did their job, and they only allowed 17 points total against Alabama because you had that pick, or the pick 6 late in the game to Bama. So they did a great job, and they're going to be great next year with all these guys coming back. But I think a lot of the question marks are on the offense. We kind of just put them off to the side. And we said, hey, this is really surprising what we're able to do. But towards the end of the season, we kind of saw what we didn't want to see.
For a rebuilding year, I mean, Evan, I don't know, if you could just kind of touch on what you think of Kelly, especially at the beginning of the year. There was a lot of hype because of how well he was performing, and he kind of was becoming his own player. Do you feel like that he did a good job, I don't want to say distancing himself from Deshaun, but not becoming... like, what's the word? I mean, I feel like he became his own player, like in his own right. You know what I mean? Like he wasn't swallowed by the pressure of succeeding
he kept
Deshaun.
saying, I'm me, Kelly B. I'm not what people see from Deshaun last year.
I mean, you feel like he did a good job of that, Evan? I think he did.
I think he did a much better job of it than we would have given him credit for before the season started. I mean, we didn't have very high expectations for him at all this year. I don't think there was a lot of hype surrounding him, mainly because we kind of accepted the fact and swallowed the pill that this was going to be a rebuilding year. We were going to wait and see Trevor Lawrence come in the spring. He was going to take over. We were going to ride him to the promised land, blah, blah, blah. And then Kelly said, wait, hold up, we still got to play this season. And he led Clemson to only their 4th 12-win season in school history. I did Google that faster than you, Jay. And it's the only 12-win season in Clemson football history in which we didn't appear in a national championship game.
Wow.
So unfortunately, it did end a little short-lived, and we were a little bitter about it. But to Kelly Bryant's credit, he statistically had a much better year than we thought he would. We knew he was a good runner, and I think he proved that he was a better passer than we thought. Obviously, he's still not as good of a passer as Deshaun. But as far as his percentage in terms of attempts to interceptions, that ratio, his was actually better than Deshaun's. He threw fewer interceptions than Deshaun. He held on to the ball, and he did what he needed to win, and did what he needed to do to win the games. Just not some of the bigger games, but I think we can all agree that Sugar Bowl had a lot more issues, and we can't blame that on Kelly Bryant. So I think he definitely deserves to be the starter going into next fall.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole off season we got to get to before we talk about starters for the fall. I mean, you just touched on you felt like he could have done better in the big games, but I sit here again and I look at the schedule and I go, but gosh, that Louisville game, third week of the season on the road, especially with how those games have gone the last 2 years while we had Deshaun as our quarterback, and to go there and dominate 47-21, then to do it a couple weeks later at Virginia Tech, and one of the hardest environments to play in the ACC, win that one 31-17. I was just really impressed with Kelly. He threw fewer interceptions. I felt like he was at times a smarter player than Deshaun, and I felt like his poise really mirrored Deshaun in a lot of ways. And I know I just kind of said, well, he was his own player, and it kind of hypocritical of me to sit here and compare him to Deshaun, but obviously, as Clemson fans,
it's hard not to.
It's still present in our minds when we think about last season and well, now 2 seasons ago, and what all Deshaun was able to do.
And not only that, but to fight off Hunter Johnson, who was lurking behind him. Obviously, Hunter didn't he performed well when he got in, but not kind of what everyone expected of the number one overall group. But Kelly did a great job of kind of putting that off to the side and keeping himself focused on being that starting quarterback. I think a lot of credit to the offense coordinators too. Tony Allen and Jeff Scott, coming into the season, they knew Kelly was not going to be as strong of a thrower. They were able to change the offensive scheme a little bit to work towards him running the ball a lot more. And he did a great job.
You had
of
the
that.
skill position of running back. Arguably, we said last fall was the deepest position on the team. With you had Etienne, you had Choice, Feaster. I mean, you had a slew of guys that you could hand the ball off to. I will say that I was sort of surprised that Deion Kane and Hunter Renfrow weren't, in my opinion, as big of a threat this past season than they were when Deshaun was quarterbacking. Maybe I'm wrong. I haven't looked at the stats, so I don't know what I don't know what they did this past season versus what they did 2 years ago. But I felt like that, Etienne was more of a threat than Hunter Renfrow.
Yeah, absolutely. Hunter was a safety blanket the entire year for him.
Yes, I mean, he was a fail-safe, essentially.
Yeah. And to limit the mistakes that they wanted Kelly Bryant not to make. And that was, huge. He might not have the incredible stats, but if he's able to limit the amount of turnovers we have, that's almost as important as scoring a touchdown at that point. So I think that was huge for him too.
Yeah, and another the third cog that you could look at is special teams. I mean, that's something that a lot of people overlook, but that was definitely a point of pain this season. With the injury to Hugel, I think it was Hugel that went out for the season, and then they brought on a walk-on, kind of a week-to-week contract. And for a while, Clemson's kicking game was pretty bad.
Big liability. But credit to Alex Spence towards the end of the season. I mean, that's one of the brighter spots we saw, and in the last couple games of the year, was he was able to be more consistent. And going into the next season, I mean, if Hugel's not 100% after that ACL tear, this could be huge, especially after this, last couple games, big confidence booster for Spence.
Took him a while to get that confidence.
It did, but he was just kind of thrown into the fire. He wasn't really expecting this going into the year, so I guess credit to him for kind of bouncing back from the disappointing start that he had to the year. So I think that was big for him.
I mean, Evan, do you feel like there's anything that jumped out to you from this past season where you were either surprised, disappointed? I think it kind of goes back to the running back position for me. But your thoughts on this past season's?
Well, real quickly, I'll do some wide receiver stat comparisons. So in 2016, Mike Williams was our number one overall receiver. He finished the year with 98 receptions, 1,361 yards, and 11 touchdowns. Compare that to Deion Kane this year, who was our top receiver, 58 receptions, 734 yards, 6 touchdowns. So you can kind of see the difference just in passing ability between Kelly Bryant and Deshaun Watson there. However, that was a good improvement for Deion from 2016. He had 38 receptions, 724 yards, and 9 touchdowns in 2016. So he actually had 20 more receptions, 3 fewer touchdowns, and 10 more yards on the year. So statistically, a little bit better of a year for him, I would say, this year, while there were fewer touchdowns, he was used more often. And Hunter Renfrow had a better year this year as well. 2016, 44 receptions, 495 yards, 6 touchdowns. And then this past year, he had 60 receptions for 602 yards. And we all know he didn't have that many touchdowns. He had 3 on the whole year. But still, a good, productive year for, our little slot receiver, our little white guy down there. So I think Kelly did a good job of spreading the ball around and at least being consistent, whereas you pretty much knew Deshaun was going to look at Mike Williams, and if he wasn't open, it was going to be somewhere else. But to answer your question, I would go to the running back position as well. I think Travis Etienne was a pleasant surprise for all of us. I don't think we quite realized how big of a recruit he was when he signed, just because there was so much in the air about Trevor Lawrence and Xavier Kelly being here next, or Xavier Thomas, excuse me. So he kind of flew under the radar, but he was a steal of a recruit out of Louisiana, and I think that he has potential to really go off next year, not being as limited in terms of carries and, getting better in his blocking ability. So I'll really look forward to see how he improves this coming fall.
You know who hasn't been mentioned yet? You know who we have not talked about? T. Higgins.
Yeah. And Amari Rogers.
Two guys that I think by the time they leave here will be class of the country receivers.
I mean, people have been saying T. Higgins could not only be the next Mike Williams, but even better than Mike Williams.
I think
that's encouraging.
There's so much.
And that could be a reason why Deion Kane felt it was time to go now, was because he had these guys behind him that were looking.
Possibly. And I mean, it's not a terrible, we touched on, it's not a terrible thing for a skill position like running backs to become as deep or more deep than wide receivers. I mean, if anything, that's only going to encourage better recruiting. I mean, we've had some amazing wide receivers come through this university in the last 6 to 8 years. It's really, it's honestly been amazing. You've got guys like Sammy Watkins, Nuke Hopkins, Jordan Leggett, even though he's at the tight end position. Dwayne Allen was really the best.
Yep.
If you want some stats on T and Amari, I got them pulled up.
Yeah, in a second, because, I mean, again, like when you compare where we were when Dabo got here to where we are now, and the expectations of a freshman receiver or a freshman running back coming into Clemson,
a lot higher.
It's significantly higher than what it was.
The bar's been really raised. But that's, you speak of tight ends, that's one thing I felt like we kind of lacked this year that might have helped a little bit to spread the ball around. You never saw Mylon Richard get the ball at all. I mean, we saw the impact that Jordan Leggett would have, late in games, especially the national championship game, that last possession.
And at times, he wasn't as reliable as we really would have liked him.
But outside of blocking, you didn't see any of that. I mean, it put a lot of pressure on some of those wide receivers like Deion Kane to make plays. And if the running game wasn't going, Kelly didn't have a lot of options, across the field. Having that tight end position, I think, would have been really nice to see. I think he got a couple catches in the last part of the year, but not much at all.
Hit us with those stats on Amari and T.
On the year, T. Higgins, he only appeared in 7 games. He had a couple, minor injuries throughout the year, but he still finished with a really solid freshman year, I would say. 17 receptions, 345 yards, 2 touchdowns. And Amari was slightly less productive, actually significantly less productive. He appeared in 12 games, 19 receptions, 123 yards, 0 touchdowns. But the difference is he was back on a couple of punt and kick returns. He returned 2 punts for 15 yards and returned 1 kick for 36 yards. So I would say of the two, he might be a little more versatile just because he's a little smaller and a little quicker, whereas T, like you said, could morph into that Mike Williams kind of Nuke Hopkins kind of guy where he's big, he's strong, and he's fast. So you have no problem throwing a ball up to him and kind of hoping for the best. So if he can stay healthy, if Amari can stay healthy, and with the continued depth that we have here at wide receiver, it just amazes me year in and year out how we have so many talented wide receivers. I would look at them to be on the outside next year and do a lot of damage, downfield.
Amari is basically Artavis Scott. I mean,
exactly.
The number is the same. The size is basically the same. He's a speed threat. Speaking of speed threat, it's going to be tough not having Ray back there. That's kind of a huge, especially in the NC State game, which I think was kind of the turning point for our season. That kick return that he had, take it back for a touchdown. That might be something we got to look towards next year. Hunter Renfrow was kind of the safety blanket for returning punts, but that speed threat can change games.
Yes.
It really can. And I think that's what Ray's kind of future is going to be in the NFL. It's going to be also another guy that's going to be missed. I think he's Dorian O'Daniel. I mean, the defensive line is going to be great, but he was one of the smartest guys.
Get to that in a second. Talk about the Power Rangers.
Exactly. Yeah, Dabo said he's one of the smartest guys he's ever seen come through the program. So, that defensive leader is going to be missed. We were able to replace losing Bullware. Can we replace, Dorian O'Daniel next year remains to be seen. I'm confident we can. But
Well,
you
real quickly though, before we transition to defense, I did pull up Mike Williams, Sammy Watkins, and DeAndre Hopkins stats just to compare their freshman year to T and Amari's freshman year. And I'm going to go ahead and throw out Sammy Watkins because he's kind of the exception. Had that stellar freshman year, 82 receptions,
I was just
1,200
looking
yards,
at that.
12 touchdowns. We're not even going to bother comparing them. But on the other hand, Mike Williams' freshman year, he appeared in 10 games, 20 receptions, 316 yards, 3 touchdowns. Whereas Nuke in his freshman year also appeared in 12 games, 52 receptions, 637 yards, and 4 touchdowns. So I would say he is a little beyond, T and Amari at this point. But Mike Williams has very comparable numbers to T. Higgins in their freshman year, and like we've already said, with their similarities. So I would not be surprised if this coming year could be T's potential breakout year.
So I think real quick before we transition to the defense, Kelly Bryant's going to be the starter next season. I think we can all agree with that.
Absolutely.
I mean,
I think
Absolutely.
so. I'm pretty
Undoubtedly.
confident he will be.
that's a way too early prediction for 2018. I'm not going to get into that.
It's
until we
Kelly's
go-
job to lose.
Yeah,
I think it is. I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of talent coming in. I think you can sit here and argue, kind of like how we did last spring, about who should be the starter. I think Kelly got Clemson to a 12-win season in his first year as a starter. I think that's – and you said that was the fourth
time ever.
all-time 12-win season for Clemson, 12 or above. So, a lot left to talk about this whole offseason.
But he's going to have a lot. He's going to have his work cut out for him, having to fend off that 6'6", 200-pound man-child that's right behind him on the depth chart. So don't be surprised if Thor Jr. makes an appearance within the first 3 or 4 games of the year.
Well,
So we got Thor and the Power Rangers.
Yeah, I was about to say,
That's pretty
let's go
intimidating.
We got the
for-
Avengers.
touch on the
Exactly.
Power Rangers. Christian Wilkins announced yesterday he's coming back to Clemson. Cleveland Farrell, Austin Bryant did the same earlier. The whole squad is back.
and Dexter Lawrence.
And Dexter
Yeah.
Lawrence. What does this mean for college football? Having guys that are NFL ready. I mean, look at the bigger picture here. Besides, go beyond Clemson, okay? These are Cleveland Farrell and Christian Wilkins were consensus first rounders.
They were top 10.
Unquestioned first rounders. They're coming back to college for their senior year. What does that say about the landscape as a whole? Are kids now starting to use all 4 years of their eligibility, or are these guys just anomalies that they just want to play together one more year?
Well, if you ask a South Carolina fan, you'd say it's a conspiracy theory on why we were able to get these guys back.
But being serious for a second, I do want to pose that question. Why do you think these guys chose to return?
I think, and I was thinking about this yesterday because Christian Wilkins was obviously the most surprising one out of all of them because he's already graduated. So he just got 1 year of eligibility left. I think they're starting to value the time that they spend now in college and how fun Dabo has made it for them at Clemson. And I think people were saying this is his best recruiting job by far because it's easy to show a guy all these things that we got here and what he's built and say, hey, you want to come here for 4 years, you can go for it. But you're having to convince the guy to pass down millions and millions of dollars to spend 1 more year here. That could potentially damage his draft stock next year. A lot of questions
you
can be raised.
get an injury like Clowney. He kind of was iffy on his final season because he didn't want to get hurt.
I think Wilkins is realizing that he's going to have a great future regardless of when he comes out. He's going to be a first rounder most likely, and he's going to have a great NFL career. Why not spend this? If he's having this much fun at school, why not spend this 1 more year? Try to get another national championship. Spend all this time with the Power Rangers that he's got, coming back with him, and have 1 more, final great year. I think that just says a lot how Dabo's kind of changed the landscape of.
I would agree with that. I think that if it's for probably almost every other coach in the country or another program, I think that they're gone.
Yeah.
I think that the culture.
Alabama, absolutely.
I think that the culture that Dabo has built here, the care that he's shown for his guys. I mean, that's the only thing that really I was just thinking about it today. I was like. Why? You're a consensus first-round draft pick.
You graduated.
This year. You've already obtained your degree.
And you won a national
You
championship.
will win. Yeah, you already won a championship at Clemson. You will make millions of dollars.
Yeah.
What is the motivation to stay? And the only thing that I can come up with in my head, and Evan, you jump in if you differ, is that Dabo has just created an environment where guys they just want to stay. They want to stay for as long as they can. Why else would you pass up on, first round draft pick, millions of dollars? What do you think, Evan?
I think it's got to be the camaraderie. I mean, you've seen how these guys are on the field. You've seen how they are on campus. behind the scenes at practice, they just have a lot of fun. Dabo's done a really great job of not only turning these guys into positive young men and positive football players, but also just giving them a positive environment throughout their time here, whether it's one season and they transfer, or 2 years, 3 years, if they stay all 4 like some of these guys are doing. So I think if you're going to commend anybody for getting these guys, to stick around for their senior years and, have one more go at it, you got to start at the top, and you got to tip your hat to Dabo Swinney just for making these guys want to stay. And, no matter what he's doing, it's working, and obviously as Clemson football fans, we're thankful for it, but it will be troublesome for the rest of the country next year to have to deal with these guys who wrecked so much havoc the past 2 years being together. So it'll be fun to watch them, that's for sure.
Yeah, I just thought really, one of the biggest surprises,
Absolutely.
I think, so far this offseason. And, if that culture perpetuates at Clemson, then we could see something like that continue for a long time. I just think that, that speaks to Dabo, what he's done with the program, how much fun the guys have at practice, like Evan touched on. And to me, that is one of the best signs of a healthy program, when you have guys who are willingly passing up on big contracts, hype in the NFL to return to college.
It's guys that can speak for players in the future too. It's not just Dabo. If Christian Wilkins is going to be, the standard of what we see going forward, he's going to be able to convince guys later on, hey, this is something you're going to want to do like me, where you're.
Well, this is a program where you're going to want to stay all 4 years. Yeah. This isn't going to be a program where you're going to go to 2 and go to the NFL, because Clemson has churned out enough NFL talent recently to, prove that, okay, if you come here and you're skilled enough, we can, coach you up, and you possibly have a chance of playing at the next level. Yeah. But if you have guys like Christian, Cleveland, Austin that want to stay, play their 4 years here, I think that's huge.
It's kind of like, it's like college basketball. You see the whole one and done thing. Guys are trying to leave.
It's the reverse of it.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
It's the reverse of it.
The landscape across college football has become like college basketball, where, hey, you stay one, you're ready to go, you leave.
Yeah.
If you're able to convince the guy to stay and pass up all this money and all this,
that's huge.
Playing professionally, that's a huge job, great coaching job by him. So.
Well, let's jump back, I guess, to bowl season. What we're going to do
real quickly, though, you want to hear something really scary?
Yeah, hit me with it.
Clemson's defense, their top 15 tacklers this past year, they're returning all but 2.
Wow.
I'll read you Kendall Joseph, our leading tackler, who a lot of people thought would declare. He's coming back. Dorian O'Daniel at number 2, we lose him. Cleveland Farrell, Christian Wilkins, Tanner Muse, J.D. Davis, Austin Bryant, Trey Lamar, Van Smith, Isaiah Simmons, Trayvon Mullen, Ryan Carter, Dexter Lawrence, James Skalski, and Kayvon Wallace.
Skalski is the best replacement for Ben Boulware imaginable. Have you ever watched Skalski play
I know
linebacker?
He's got a great name. I've heard he's a big dude.
Skalski really he is almost like
6 foot 240.
He's a mad dog.
That's a solid hunk of meat coming at you.
That's all Boulware was a mad dog. He obviously has a lot of football smarts, but Skalski just attacks. He attacks and asks questions later. So honestly, I think you'll just see Skalski's name continue to rise on the tackle total. But we're gonna jump now back to bowl games. This past bowl season, pick our favorite and why. I guess we'll start back in the Bear Cave with Evan. What was your favorite bowl game from this past season?
Well, this might not be a very popular pick, and if you're not a Wisconsin Badger, you probably wouldn't pick this as your favorite bowl game. But I'm going to go with the Capital One Orange Bowl, not because of the quality of the game, but because I was there. I was in Miami.
I know what you're going to say.
Yeah, I was in Miami for a week. I worked the game. I got to know some of the Orange Bowl committee members. I stayed at the Wisconsin team hotel, did a lot of hospitality for the team employees and the boosters. The athletic director, Barry Alvarez, was there almost every night. So
this is not a spot for you to run an ad for the Orange Bowl. This is for you to tell us what
no,
your favorite bowl game was.
I'm just telling you how much fun I had. You can watch the Orange Bowl or not. I can care less. But no, it was a lot of fun being in Miami for the week. Everybody, of course, was in a good mood. The weather was phenomenal. I went to the game, had pretty good seats. We stayed till about half. It was entertaining. The crowd was in it. Obviously it was a heavy Miami crowd, and they were pretty raucous. But no, it was a really good time. I enjoyed the whole week. The people I met, and it was a really good time. So I would go with the Orange Bowl just because of that severe bias that I have for it right now.
Weather in New Orleans was not
I'm sure not the
not
best.
nearly as good as it was.
It
in
was
Miami.
80 degrees in Miami all week. I laid by the
freezing.
pool.
It was below
all
freezing, I wanna
afternoon. It
say.
was nice.
Did any
Kickoff.
people from Wisconsin melt while they were there? Because that's a lot different.
Yeah,
than
no, they
from
were
Wisconsin.
shocked. They had on shorts and T-shirts, and they said, "Yeah, it's like -12 back home, but we're down here. It's a lot of fun." So they were real nice people. Sat next to the parents of one of the players on my flight back on New Year's Eve, and of course they were in a good mood after the win. So they were just thankful to be there. Like win, lose or draw, you know, they got a vacation out of it to stay at
To Miami.
the Trump Hotel in Miami instead
God,
of being
great
in
golf course
Madison,
back there.
Wisconsin in December. So you can't really complain about that.
Yeah,
But
very interesting.
we all had fun.
Very interesting Wisconsin. Voice you said there. That was a very interesting.
Yeah, that was an interesting.
Was it good? I couldn't really
Accent,
tell.
that's what I was thinking of.
We'll have to replay. All right, Bradley, what's your favorite bowl game?
I went with Army San Diego State. This is kind of one that I kind of overlooked going into bowl season. I just thought that Rashad Penny was going to take control. He was one of the best running backs in the country. But kudos to Army, a 10-3 finish, put up 42 points. I believe there were like 12 total passes attempted in this game. So an old school style game, but Army scoring with like 18 seconds left on a 1-yard touchdown. I just thought it was really cool for them, seeing what they had been through, especially after the Navy game, and to cap off a great season for them. They haven't won 10 games in a really long time, so
Yeah.
I just thought it was a cool finish for them.
Go Army, beat Navy. I was happy with the. I mean, they played great this season. 10 wins, like you said. It's been a while for them. It was a good game. There were a few. I mean, my favorite was the Valero Alamo Bowl between Stanford and TCU. I personally, this one was my favorite just because of how back and forth it was. Stanford comes out, gets a nice lead, sizable lead. Really like they were going to run away with it for a while, similar to how TCU was getting shellacked. I want to say by Oregon.
Yeah.
Wasn't it last
2 years
year's?
ago? I think it
either
was, yeah.
last year or 2 years ago in the same bowl game, the Alamo Bowl, and then they came roaring back in the second half. Outclassed Stanford second half. Just were able to really. And I didn't catch as much of the game as I would have liked to, but with the second half, I felt like TCU's offense just wore out the Stanford defense. Like we obviously
Which just doesn't happen very often.
doesn't happen often because of how physical they are, but they were able to put up touchdown after touchdown. I mean, every time they got their hand on the ball, they were scoring a touchdown, except towards the very end of the game, they kicked a field goal in the fourth with 3 minutes left. But yeah, 4 possessions in the second half, 4 touchdowns, boom, 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 boom.
And they get Bryce Love back next year.
And
I
they
just saw he's returning for his senior year. So big for them.
11-3 season for TCU. Thought it was a great game overall. My favorite bowl game, like I said. But I don't know. I mean, looking at the bowl season as a whole, it wasn't that.
First half was bad. First half was
Yeah.
real ugly. We made up for it in some of the New Year's Six games later on with the UCF game and the Rose Bowl, obviously. But I know the one that I got most wrong on was I think we all picked App State over Toledo over App State. I'm pretty sure across the
Yeah, that
board.
wasn't even close.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I predicted like a blowout for Toledo after seeing their conference championship game. What was it, 34-0? Something like that, App State. So
Yep.
definitely wish I could go back and change my pick for that.
All right, I guess if I was unbiased, if I had to pick my favorite unbiased bowl game, I'll go with the Franklin American Mortgage Music City Bowl. Now, obviously, this game means nothing to anyone that's not a Wildcat. But Northwestern finishing off a really solid year under Pat Fitzgerald, winning back-to-back bowl games for the first time in school history, and stopping Kentucky on a 2-point conversion at the very last second to hold on to that win. I know we were watching it in the hospitality room because, of course, all the Wisconsin people wanted to support, Big Ten people. So they laid out a pretty good cheer for that after, Northwestern made that final stand. So that was a really just entertaining game, coming down, close there at the end, and Pat Fitzgerald's team getting, a really good 10th win and sending senior running back Justin Jackson off on a high note. So that was a fun one just to watch with people that were supporting Northwestern. So that was a good one.
Hey, if you could pull up the records for each Power 5 conference. I'm
Just gonna
curious
say,
to see
Big
that.
Ten had a great
Big Ten had an
great bowl
awesome year. I
season.
know the SEC was a little down.
Pac-12 was like 1-8.
Pac-12 had the worst year, I think, in like bowl
Power 5
history,
history,
or
yeah.
Power 5 history. But yeah, if you could pull up the overall records for each Power 5, I'd be curious to look at them. But yeah, I mean, I think that obviously a lot of people were surprised the Big Ten did as well as they did. But Pac-12, obviously,
I think they probably would have scored if they would have made the playoff this year, hopefully so.
yeah. But I mean, there were some games that like with Florida State and Southern Miss, you knew that Florida State was just going to come out and throttle them.
One game I saw, which I mean, I don't want to go too deep into next year, but Florida Atlantic, I mean, the Lane Train, I think they won like 51
Who'd they
to
play in
3.
their bowl game?
I want to say it was Ohio. They won like
Miami,
50
Ohio?
No, I think it was the Ohio Bobcats, if I'm not mistaken. You can look that up and double check, but they won like 51 to 3. And after the game, they talked about, what next season, because they're talking about like what if there's a chance that a non-Power 5 team is going to make the playoff. What does it take? And they said, got to win your bowl game, gain respect, and then start beating some Power 5 teams next year. They have Oklahoma, and I can't remember the other team they play. It's like Nebraska on the road next year. So that would be very interesting to see, a Florida Atlantic team go on the road and beat like an Oklahoma or something like that. Kind of like what Houston did a couple years ago. That's something I'm kind of looking forward to seeing next year. You got the opponent that they had on there?
No, I tried to find it. I scrolled through them all, but I could not. Oh,
Akron.
Akron. They played
50 to 3.
50 to 3. Wow,
So,
Lane Train is
if
rolling.
Lane stays there, watch out for Florida Atlantic next year. You never know.
Yeah, I don't. But did you happen to get those conference Power 5 records pulled up?
I
bowl
Googled
games?
it, and it keeps giving me articles over a specific team or a specific conference, but I need to have them all listed out right here in front of me, and here we go. The Independent Conference, which is kind of an oxymoron because it's not a conference. Notre Dame and Army both won. They were both predicted to lose, so that was nice for the two of them. Big Ten, as we all know, finished 7-1, with the only loss being Michigan to South Carolina in the Outback Bowl, blowing a 16-point lead in that one.
Yeah, Michigan should have won that game.
They should have, but it's kind of hard to win when you don't have a quarterback. So.
Played two halves.
Yeah,
football.
you know.
Yeah.
The Sun Belt finished at 4-1. Arkansas State, the Red Wolves, being the only team in the Sun Belt that lost their bowl game. ACC 8-3, which was better than everybody thought we would do. We were predicted to go 6-5, but of course Clemson was the big letdown there. Big 12 5-3. With, of course, the most notable loss being Oklahoma in that heartbreaker of a Rose Bowl. The American Conference went 4-3. Shout out to UCF for beating Auburn in the Peach Bowl, finishing undefeated but not being the national champions. And I refuse to acknowledge the UCF Golden Knights as being national champions, but that's a different discussion for a different day. The Mountain West Conference finished at 500. They went 3-3. SEC 4-5, which, of course, doesn't sound that impressive, but when they had two teams in the national championship game, you can't really argue too much. Conference USA also at 4-5. Their league champion, which was Florida Atlantic, finished the season on a 10-game winning streak after beating Akron. The MAC finished 1-4, with the Ohio Bobcats being the only victors out of the MAC conference. And the Pac-12, in the worst bowl season in Power 5 conference history, went 1-8. Utah being the only team to win from the Pac-12.
Can only go uphill from here.
That's right. Yeah, well, we got a lot that we've got to touch on throughout this off season. Hopefully, we'll bring a show to you about once a week. I think is what we're shooting for. Once we get a schedule pinned down, we'll be able to post a little bit more on our social media platforms to let everybody know. But it's been fun bringing you another semester start to After Further Review. This is our 4th semester. Hard to believe. 38th episode, which just blows my mind.
That's a lot of bantering. A lot of arguing.
That's a lot of arguing. Well, it's been fun bringing this one to you. For Evan McDowell, Bradley Kendall, and Jay Smith, this has been After Further Review.
Thanks for watching.